I really want to talk to you about nationalism, statehood in later on in this discussion, because as I studied it, kind of when states came into existence, they kind of replaced religious symbols, religion, in many ways, not just Islam, but all
Or they
religions.
appropriated them. And so then
Yeah,
you have religious nationalism, including some nationalisms which are marked only by religious identity, but are nevertheless idolatrous and not religious. And
yeah,
so then when they say, oh, it's a religious war, like, say, the uh, Bosnian Serbian war over the breakup of Yugoslavia, or even, say, the Catholic Protestant struggle over Northern Ireland and things like that. No, it's not.
yeah,
It's nationalism. It is not religion that is
yeah,
happening, even if the people are taking as the marker of their nationalism, they're appropriating religious symbols. And there is a general principle here, which is that in the relations between religion and state, the state always eats the religion and the religion never eats the state. This is a general principle. The state eats the religion never eats the state. And I can provide historical examples going back to medieval times of that.
I think that's so true. Um, Also, um, I think it's nationalism, as I see it, it is at worst it's like idolatry, and at best it's like tribalism, and those things are things that Islam came to remove, and those shackles to break, and we kind of put them back on.
Right,
Um,
that's right. And there is, of course, love of home, that's a natural thing, that's acceptable. And so people say love of home environment. I mean, my home environment forever in my life, even though here I am 76 years old and I haven't lived there for decades, is Seattle. Seattle, I'm a native Pacific Northwesterner. I know I visited all 39 counties of Washington State. That's my home. That's my original home. That's what I felt was home. And so all of those feelings from childhood that you get from living in the three childhood homes that I remember fondly there with my parents growing up. And so that is kind of like the womb that a person came out of. And now I live here, and now Philadelphia is my home, and it has been for a very long time. And more importantly, Philadelphia is my children's home. And for them, it is as essentially their home as Seattle is mine. So there is that kind of connection with the place. But in the end, one also has to acknowledge in Islam that the um, uh, connection with a place also is simply a passing thing that's part of our passing life through the world.
yeah,
And what Allah says in the Quran, "Siru fil ard," travel around in the earth, and so on. He doesn't emphasize in the Quran this connection with place, actually. So um, the um, generally the association with place, it's something that's natural and acceptable, but also it has its limits.
as I studied it, so when national states started coming into existence, obviously starting from France, um, Catholics and Muslims were the most resistant to the idea of statehood because they just couldn't understand this concept of pledging allegiance to a location as a piece of land rather than a person.
Yeah, that is true. Although, in my historical analysis of it, the nationalism arose in the western fringes of Europe in the seven Aboriginal nation states. These were nation states that all developed nationalism before 1600, and and because they had a long time to develop it, nationalism came to them as something more natural and easier to handle.
Mm.
And those states, starting with, of course, England, the ultimate Aboriginal nation state, and France, whose nationalism was provoked by the English, And Spain and Portugal, which are Catholic countries, but nevertheless are part of the Aboriginal nation states, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Sweden. And that is a closed set of the seven Aboriginal nation states that were the original places that had nationalism. And then nationalism spread from them elsewhere because it was provoked by them. And as you mentioned, France being very important in that, the conquests of Napoleon of most of Europe, brief as they were, strongly provoked nationalism in Germany and Italy. And nationalism moved eastward, seeped eastward until it hit the Eastern European countries, which were all multinational, multi-ethnic, multilingual empires that had not nationalism at all. Russia, the Tsarist Russia, was ruled by a dynasty of Germans who had hardly any Russian blood in them at all, and who spoke French, not German, as the court language. And so, this is just the opposite of nationalism completely. By the fall of the Tsar, Nicholas II, of course, now was speaking Russian because nationalism was on the rise, so they had switched to that. But these states, unlike Western Europe, where the peoples, the conquered peoples like the Welsh and so on, had a very long time to deal with this, and it was worked out and sorted out over centuries. It just hit Eastern Europe as like a wave of force, and everybody then became fanatically nationalist, and all the states, the incipient states, all the linguistic groups were claiming maximal areas that contradicted each other, and soon enough they were all massacring each other and driving each other out. And of course, that is the context in which Zionism really arose as well, which is the idea that the followers of the Jewish religion are actually a nationality and should have a nation state as well in order to protect themselves. So nationalism after England was justified everywhere else as a defensive measure that, oh, well, those people next to us, they have nationalism, so we'd better get it too, or else we'll be overrun. So it became a defensive measure, and its excuse was, others have nationalism, so we have to have it too, whether it's any good or not. And that is a very difficult nut to crack. To dispense with that kind of argument, very, very difficult.